catch it. There we go. Okay. Well, like I said, my name is Nicole Schmidt. I'm the executive director of the Alaska Wildlife Alliance, and we are a 501c3. That's a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1978 by Alaskans, and we advocate for healthy ecosystems which are scientifically and ethically managed to protect our wildlife for present and future generations. That's a lot of jargon, but what does that mean? We have three primary programs that we focus on. The first is to help wildlife adapt to climate change. We call this our climate adaptation program. And we currently have a couple of projects across Alaska and strongly encourage you to look up some of that information on our website. We also plan to have some Wildlife Wednesday presentations about these programs in the future. Our second program, which is very topical to tonight's talk, is recovering threatened and endangered species in Alaska. Cook Inlet belugas have been a priority species for us for many years, and we're excited to continue this work. And our third program is being a voice for wildlife in decision-making spaces. Earlier this evening, we just got back from the Board of Game meeting, so we are in these regulatory spaces where decisions are being made that impact wildlife, and we try to be a voice for wildlife when we can. Fundamentally, we're a membership-based organization. We have a lot of wonderful volunteers helping us with outreach. On the right, you'll see our Kenai Peninsula coordinator, Teresa, who is involved in Alaska Beluga Monitoring Partnership in the program. And she's always out watching for belugas on the Kenai River. And then we also conduct research with our partners. Down on the bottom left is a photo of a research project we have in the Homer and Anchor Point area about beavers. So we're up to lots of things and would love to see more involvement from all of you. And thank you so much for joining tonight. For belugas specifically, in addition to being a member of the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Program, we also have a text alert system for the Kenai and Kasilof rivers. And so this is free. You can text the word beluga to that number listed. I'll also put it in the chat. And you will receive a free text alert when any of the volunteers have seen belugas in the Kenai or Kasilof rivers. And we also note where we found them, how many there were, and where you might be able to see them. We also, these are hot off the press, we partnered with the City of Kenai and the University of Alaska and the Soldotna campus to install 2 live beluga cams on the Kenai River. And so that means that you can watch for belugas from the comfort of your home, anywhere from your cell phone or your laptop. That is on our YouTube page on our streaming site. So feel free to check those out. And finally, on our website and social media, we have all of our recent news with advocacy and projects that we're working on. I strongly encourage you to check it out. You can also sign up for our e-newsletter, which comes out once a month at akwildlife.org. And with that, I am very excited to be introducing Michelle, who's going to talk to us tonight about the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Program. And while Michelle, let me stop sharing my screen. I know that Michelle has some introductory slides, but as she gets her screen up, I want to encourage everyone to view this program in full screen. And we'll keep folks muted and the videos off so that we can maintain good bandwidth for Michelle to show her photos and videos. Or I guess not videos, photos.
Okay, thank you so much, Nicole, for that introduction. Can you see my screen okay?
I can.
In full mode? Okay.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining to watch this presentation. My name is Michelle, and I'm going to be talking about a little bit about a background on beluga whales, and then I'm going to go into the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Program, talk about what our program does, the data that we collect, and if you're interested in joining or being a volunteer, I'll give you some information about that. I do ask that we hold questions till the end, just because I can't really see the the Zoom interface when questions come through. Or Nikki can stop me if there's a chat. Okay, so just a further introduction of myself. I am the coordinator of the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Program. I've been the coordinator since 2023, so a little bit over a year now. I am originally from New Jersey, and I started coming to Alaska seasonally back in 2013 when I started working on whale watching boats. And then from there, I kind of bounced around the United States, taking on different marine biology jobs with marine mammals and fisheries, just gaining experience. I did eventually go to University of Alaska Fairbanks to get my master's in marine biology. And then after my master's, I got an Alaska Sea Grant State Fellowship with NOAA Fisheries Protected Resource Division, where I did a lot of work with marine mammal policy and regulation in Juneau. And then from there, that's how I found out about my current position that I'm in. So I am currently now subcontracted with NOAA Fisheries as the coordinator, and I'm based out of the Anchorage office here. Okay, so just to start off, a little basic background, some fun facts on beluga whales. Belugas are medium-sized toothed whales, also known as odontocetes. And they typically can be about 16 feet in length and weigh a little over 3,000 pounds. So they're pretty large animals, and they actually have a very long lifespan. They can live up to 90 years. So they're an impressively long-lived animal. And they're also very social animals. So you'll often see them traveling in pods, and they tend to form large hunting groups for foraging. Now, belugas are most closely related to narwhals, so both those species are part of the family Monodontidae, and they share a lot of the same characteristics because they are an Arctic living species. So some of those characteristics are they both lack dorsal fins. They don't have those large dorsal fins like orcas and other dolphins do, and that's because they spend so much time around the ice. A large dorsal fin would definitely get in their way. So instead, they have something called another feature called a dorsal ridge. And this helps them navigate a lot more easily through ice flows. And these species also have a very thick layer of blubber. And this helps them with thermoregulation and stores energy in that cold water. And that blubber can make up 40% of their body weight. So they definitely have that thick layer of fat to keep them warm. Now, we know belugas as being the white whale, but they actually aren't born white. They start off as a dark gray when they're first born, and then they lighten with age. So once a beluga turns white, that's how you know that it's has reached reproductive maturity. And belugas reach maturity anywhere from 6 to 14 years. So it's a really wide range. And even sometimes it takes males even longer than 14 years to reach reproductive maturity. And looking at that coloration is how researchers can visually estimate beluga age. And I do have some fun photo examples here to show belugas at different life stages. So this photo here, you can clearly see a white whale and a very dark whale. So that would be an adult and its calf. And then here we see two whales that look about the same, like the same size, but they're different coloration. So this would be an adult and a subadult. And then I like this photo because it's a cool aerial photo where you can see all different life stages. So we have a few adults in there, a subadult, and even a calf. And you can also see that a good photo of like that dorsal ridge that I was talking about. Now, belugas are kind of known for having like that big squishy looking head. That's why, you know, they're so loved because they're so cute looking. But that big head is actually a really important organ. It's like called a melon head, and that organ is used for sound production. Sound is extremely useful for belugas. And that melon head is composed of lipid or fat, and it can actually change shape when producing sound. So here's a good photo that shows all the different ways that the beluga can change the shape of its head, and being able to change the shape of its melon allows it to direct sound where they want it to. Belugas are also known as canaries of the sea. That's another nickname for them because they have such a wide range of sounds that they make. They can whistle, chirp, squeal, grunt. Sometimes they actually do sound like birds chirping. And again, as I mentioned before, they are a very social animal, so they're very vocal and they vocalize often to communicate. Belugas also use echolocation, so that's when they use that sonar or sound source that allows them to find food and navigate their surrounding. So that melon can simply project its echolocation signals out. It could bounce off of prey, and then they'll receive that signal back and get a mental picture of what's in front of them and their surroundings. And another really unique feature of belugas is that their neck vertebrae are not fused like most whales and dolphins. So belugas can actually nod their heads up and down and move their heads back and forth from side to side. And that feature also helps them direct sound signals more efficiently. So they're really good at using sound efficiently. But surprisingly enough, they do have really sharp vision in and out of water. It is comparable to humans. It's just that, when you think about the waters of, Cook Inlet, which have a ton of sediment or are really murky, how vision is not quite as useful as sound. Now, there are 5 populations of belugas in the United States, and they all happen to be in Alaska. So there's some Arctic species in the Beaufort Sea, the Eastern Chukchi Sea population. There's the Eastern Bering Sea population, Bristol Bay, and the Cook Inlet population. And there's even a newer discovered small, tiny resident population in Yakutat. They're a very cryptic, mysterious population, but they are also in Yakutat too. But today I'm going to be focusing on the Cook Inlet beluga population. Now, the Cook Inlet beluga whales, they do live in Cook Inlet year round, so they don't have like seasonal migrations. They do use different parts of Cook Inlet at different times of the year. So they do move around Cook Inlet throughout the year, but they still stay in Cook Inlet year round. And the Cook Inlet belugas, they are a distinct population segment, so meaning that they are genetically and geographically isolated from the other species. And they're also opportunistic feeders. So they will kind of eat whatever is around. They have a very diverse diet. They eat lots of different fish species. They'll eat squid, octopus, snails, kind of whatever is around. They'll hunt for it. There are certain times of the year where they are targeting specific prey. But overall, they do have a very diverse diet. All right, so a year in the life of a Cook Inlet beluga. Now, from mid-spring to fall, the belugas tend to concentrate in large groups near river mouths and shallow bays, and they especially tend to be in areas like Kinnick Arm, Turnagain Arm, the Susitna River Delta, and then they'll even be around the Kenai River and the Kasilof River. And at this time of year, they're targeting seasonally concentrated prey. So there's like particularly going after the salmon and the Eulachon or hooligan runs. So we often see belugas going up some of these rivers, which is really neat to see a beluga going up a river. But that's why they do tend to hang out around the mouths of rivers to really target those runs. And birds likely occur during July and October. So we don't know, belugas are it's hard to follow their lives. We don't know a ton about their reproductive lifestyle, but we suspect that the birds are occurring somewhere between July and October. Now, once the colder weather comes and the winter hits, the belugas will typically disperse south to more of the lower Cook Inlet area to occupy deeper waters that are more ice-free, and they tend to feed offshore at that point. There are still beluga sightings in Upper Cook Inlet, just not as often. And a recent study did identify the first official winter feeding habitat for beluga whales in Tuxedni Bay. So that's on the western side of Cook Inlet. And that was found through an acoustic study using hydrophones. But typically at this time of year during the winter, we definitely know less about how they're using their habitat and what they're doing because the environmental conditions just make it really hard to collect data on them and study them. There's not as much, definitely not as much sunlight. It's cold, there's a lot of ice. So we just don't have the opportunity to study them quite as much during the winter months. Now, the Cook Inlet beluga population declined 75% between 1979 and 2018. Their historic estimated abundance was around 1,300. So they've always been more of a smaller population anyway. But then by 2018, the estimated abundance was 279 individuals. So the population definitely rapidly declined in that time span. And the most recent estimate from 2023 is 331 individuals. So there is, some hope that maybe the population is at least stabilizing, even though, the numbers are not nearly as close as it was to like their historic numbers. And the initial decline was due to overhunting. Belugas are, an extremely culturally important food source for local native tribes. Now, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, subsistence hunters did voluntarily stop hunting. And the thought was that with this removal of the hunting pressure, the population would begin to grow again. But unfortunately, the population continued to decline. So in 2008, NOAA Fisheries listed Cook Inlet belugas as an endangered species. And it's interesting because Cook Inlet is such a challenging environment to live in as far as extreme tidal changes and a ton of sediment. The Cook Inlet belugas have really learned to adapt to this environment and over time have learned how to live in this type of environment. So it's unlikely that other beluga populations would be able to come in and take their place if the Cook Inlet belugas went extinct. So that's why it's really important to protect our Cook Inlet belugas, because if they disappear, then they would likely disappear forever because other populations just aren't able to specialize in this type of environment the way that the Cook Inlet belugas do. Now, the Cook Inlet beluga is one of NOAA Fisheries' 9 species in the spotlight. So this is an initiative that brings greater attention and marshals resources to save species most highly at risk of extinction. So the Cook Inlet belugas are considered critically endangered. And following this ESA listing, a critical habitat was designated for Cook Inlet belugas in 2011. So that gives the belugas even further federal protection. And critical habitat is habitat that is considered essential for beluga survival. So it's areas that are important for feeding, important for calving, important for traveling. So all this area that we're seeing in this checkered red here, that is all the designated critical habitat in Cook Inlet. So you can see that quite a bit of Cook Inlet is designated critical habitat for those belugas. Now, the cause of the continued population decline is unknown. But there are a number of potential causes and threats that have been identified. So this is a list of some of those events. Noise and cumulative effect are kind of thought to be higher ranked or more of an effect, especially because the belugas are living in a very urban area. There's a lot of vessel traffic, and that noise could potentially be masking them able to call to each other, masking, them able to find food. But then there's also disease and pollution and reduction in prey. So it's most likely a combination of any one of these issues. But that's also what makes it so challenging to recover this population, because, we can't pinpoint what the actual threat or threats is, especially if there's many of them. Now, there are current efforts going on to recover the Cook Inlet beluga population. There's a lot of different types of surveys and monitoring going on. Because again, it is sometimes hard to study these animals, especially, getting out there on a boat in Cook Inlet can be, up in the upper Cook Inlet where there's a lot of tidal changes can be hard. So there's a lot of challenges that come along to studying these animals. But there is monitoring that's in place. There's acoustic monitoring, aerial monitoring, vessel surveys, shore-based surveys, which is where the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Program comes in, because our program does shore-based data collection. There's also tissue samples that can be sent out to the lab to test for various things. There's also different contaminant sampling where researchers are even starting to look at their prey and water to see, what's going on with that. Outreach, modeling. So there's a lot of efforts right now that are in place. Now, due to the ESA listing of the Cook Inlet belugas, NOAA Fisheries developed a Cook Inlet beluga whale recovery plan in 2016. And this is a document that identifies strategies, goals, criteria, and actions targeted at recovering this species. And the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Program does support some specific recovery actions that are identified in this plan. Just for a few examples, engage in education outreach efforts targeted at informing the public on the status of these belugas and their threats. So our program is an education outreach program. Another action is to promote the use of citizen science. AKBMP is a community science program. And another action is to work with agencies and stakeholders to monitor vessel activity, which is data that we also collect when we're out there monitoring. So, and this is a very long document. There's a lot of recovery actions laid out, and these are just a few examples that the Beluga Monitoring Program is supporting. So that brings us to, well, okay, what is the actual Beluga Monitoring Program? So I'm going to roll it back. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our program does. I refer to it as our acronym AKBMP, so that's what I'm going to be using for the rest of this talk. AKBMP was formed in June of 2019, and AKBMP is a NOAA-led community science program in collaboration with some amazing local partner organizations to facilitate the standardized shore-based data collection of Cook Inlet beluga whales. So we are essentially recruiting members of the public who want to be a part of the Cook Inlet beluga recovery efforts, and we're training them to collect data on these whales to contribute to this ongoing long-term data set to monitor these animals. I do have to give a special shout out to our local partner organizations. We have the Alaska Wildlife Alliance, Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, Beluga Whale Alliance, Defenders of Wildlife, and Kenai Peninsula College. So our partners help keep this program running. They're training volunteers, and they do a lot of other work to support the program. And each partner does have their own mission and do their own amazing things to support Cook Inlet belugas and other wildlife. So I definitely recommend looking into all our partners to see what they do as well. Now, AKBMP has 2 monitoring seasons. So we have a spring monitoring season, which is always somewhere around mid-March to May 31st. And then we have a fall season, which is early or mid-August to late November. We don't monitor in June and July just because a lot of times the belugas leave the Anchorage area during that time to go to the Susitna River Delta. They like to congregate there, and we can't really access that area. So we have to take a couple months off until they come back in the fall, and it also gives all our volunteers a break for summer too. So it does work out. Now, the start and end of some of our monitoring seasons depends on the weather and ice conditions. So we can't start our spring season until the ice breaks up, and we monitor as far into November as we can until we get iced out. So as you can see in these pictures here, the ice can get really, really thick, which makes it super hard to look for belugas. And by that point, if there's ice that's that thick, it means it's very cold outside. So that is hard on volunteers to monitor in areas that cold. But that's sometimes how thick the ice gets before our season starts and ends. Now, Cook Inlet belugas are very unique because they are one of the only populations in the world to live near urban centers and are easily accessible from the road system. So our program takes advantage of this by conducting shore-based monitoring. And all of our monitoring sites are publicly accessible. We have 6 specific monitoring sites. One of them is at Ship Creek in downtown Anchorage. We have a few along Seward Highway, some highway pull-offs, one at the 20-mile river. There's a site on the property of the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, which is a really neat site. And then we have a site at the Kenai River and the Kasilof River. And all of our monitoring sites are known beluga foraging areas. So this is just a map to show a better depiction of, how our sites are actually laid out. Ship Creek is actually right next to the Port of Alaska, so it gets really busy there. And then we have our highway pull-off, 20-mile, the Point, and in Middle Inlet, Kenai River and Kasilof River. And each of our sites is co-hosted with NOAA Fisheries by one of our amazing partners I was mentioning before. So our partners will monitor and train volunteers at their respective site that they co-host. So as far as our actual monitoring sessions, all of our monitoring sessions are about 2 hours long, and they are scheduled around the tide. So some of our sites have low tide sessions and high tide sessions. Some of our sites, like the sites in Turnagain Arm, only have high tide sessions because that's really the only time that the belugas actually go up Turnagain Arm. So it just depends on the site. And some of our sites will have 1 to 3 scheduled sessions per day. So our volunteers will sign up for monitoring sessions as they are available. So even if a site has 1 to 3 or 3 sessions scheduled that day, it doesn't necessarily mean that all those sessions are being scheduled or all those sessions are being monitored. It just depends on volunteer availability. We also only monitor during daylight hours just for visibility and volunteer safety. Our volunteer safety is as absolute priority for this program. So the data that we collect, we have 2 data sheets for monitoring. So we have a session log, and this is the log that we fill out no matter what. Every time we go to a monitoring session, we fill out this log. This is just general information about the session itself, environmental conditions, human activity over the course of the entire session, maybe other marine mammals that you're seeing in the area. So this just gives an overview of what actually occurred during that session. And then we have a second data sheet, our beluga log, and this is what we fill out if we see belugas. So this is general beluga information. This is where we'll fill out, the age, class, or color of the animals, estimated group size, behavior, human activity that was occurring during beluga presence. So this is the type of data that we're collecting when we're actually seeing these belugas. And there is a fun array of beluga behavior that you can see out there. Most of the time we see them traveling, or even if you're not volunteering and you're, just looking for belugas in general, this is maybe some of the behavior that you'll see. Traveling is just kind of when they're moving on along, you're really only seeing their backs come out of the water. Sometimes you'll catch them going on a deeper dive. You'll see their tail coming out of the water, and that's how you know that they're going to be down for a little bit, going for some food source deeper in the water column. Sometimes they like to tail slap. Every once in a while, you'll see them spy hops. This is when they actually stick their full heads out of the water to view the surroundings above the surface of the water. And you'll even occasionally see them side scanning. I've never actually seen them do this, but it does happen, where they just kind of like swim along and look through the corner of their eye as they're swimming on their sides. Now we are also collecting human activity, and this is because understanding the human activity that's taking place at our monitoring sites during beluga presence and absence is really vital for understanding their impact. especially since some of the potential threats inhibiting beluga recovery are directly related to humans. So a lot of the human activities that we're collecting data on are, vessels. So Ship Creek is right next to the Port of Alaska, which is a really, really busy human activity site. There's constantly large vessels coming in and out. There's marine construction and dredgers dredging the area. So we're recording all of this information. We also even record information like surfers, just because they like to surf the board tide and turning an arm, and the belugas also like to come up turning an arm with the board tide. So we like to record when the surfers or paddleboarders are out there. We record marine debris. So this is an actual set of balloons that was floating and turning an arm and actually landed in the water where the belugas were feeding. So we record that. And we also record, small vessels or even fishing activities that are occurring. So this is everything that we're recording, and we are just documenting the activity. Our program is not in charge of analyzing impacts and making claims about what's actually influencing their recovery. We're simply collecting that data and then exporting it to those who are studying the specific potential impacts. And a lot of our monitoring sites actually show a lot of seasonal variability in human activity. For example, the Kenai River, which is one of our monitoring sites, this is what it looks like in May. As you can see, it's pretty empty. And then just 2 months later, during the fishing season, the Kenai River is filled with boats and dip netters. It's quite a drastic change from May. So since the belugas and humans are, using the same habitat for its resources, it's just important to monitor and collect data on how humans and belugas are, interacting in the same environment. Now, one question that I always get is, well, how is the monitoring data actually being used? So, our volunteers are going out and collecting all this data. Well, what's happening with it? Is it being used in any sort of way? So the data that we collect is used to inform the conservation management and ongoing research related to endangered Cook Inlet belugas. So we share our data with NOAA Fisheries for management purposes. We share our data with one of our collaborators, the Cook Inlet Beluga Photo ID project. So our volunteers, if they take good beluga photos, they'll submit it, and then I send it to our collaborators so they could add that to their photo ID catalog. We share our data with beluga researchers, and we'll share our data with even graduate and undergraduate students who use it for various projects. And then our data is also incorporated into a few different databases. We also have seasonal reports that are posted on our website for public viewing and use as well. So you could always, look at the review of our monitoring season, look at our numbers. We post that on our website after our seasons. But that was pretty broad. So I want to give just a couple examples of AKBMP data utility, like more specific examples. One of those examples is used, like I mentioned, by federal managers. So under Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, agencies must consult with NOAA Fisheries or the U.S. Wildlife Service on activities that may be impacting endangered species. So for example, the Port of Alaska always consults with NOAA Fisheries on projects that involve in-water construction because marine mammals may be affected by the work being performed, and as a result, specific mitigation measures are put in place that the port is required to follow to eliminate or reduce negative impacts on the belugas. So that's just like an example of why someone would have to consult. So NOAA Fisheries Alaska region does use AKBMP data in their Section 7 consultations, and our data has helped inform times of beluga presence and absence to assist in determining when various construction activities could occur or couldn't occur near some of our monitoring sites. So when I did a quick search, this is a list of some of the consultations that AKBMP data has been used in. Now I'm definitely oversimplifying this consultation process for time's sake, and it's obviously very dense. I'm just trying to show an example of specifically how our data is used. And there's consultations right now that are pending that AKBMP data has been incorporated in. And our data is also used, like I said, by beluga researchers. This is a recent report that came out where AKBMP visual observation data was used to confirm acoustic detections of belugas in the Kenai River. So the information that we collect is also used as additional or supplementary data in some specific research projects. So I think that's pretty cool too. Now, I obviously have to give a special shout out to our volunteers. They are superstars. Our program would not exist without our volunteers. So I have to highlight the significance of the work that they do. We have had over 350 observers come through this program. We've, across all of our years and all of our seasons, over 27 sessions have been monitored. Over 5,500 hours have been monitored. 907 days have been observed, and over 10,000 beluga sightings we've collected. So that is, 10,000 beluga sightings that would not have been documented if our volunteers were not out there collecting that data. So they keep the program going. And this is just some fun pictures from our past fall season. We had a great fall season, and we really couldn't have done it without our dedicated community scientists. So why become a beluga community scientist? There's just so many reasons, but the first reason, which is really important, is that it is super fun. I mean, look at this group of people here pretending to be belugas. They're having an amazing time. So it's just a really good time. It's a great way to spend time with your community, friends, family. It's also a great way to get outdoors and observe the belugas. And I have to say, we are really fortunate to have access to such an incredible species pretty much right in our backyard. That is really unique. I mean, we're able to see an Arctic species that many people don't ever get to see in their lives. We get to see it right in our backyard. So I think that's really neat. It's an opportunity to learn about your local ecosystem. And for me, probably the most important is I think it's just super rewarding to be a part of the conservation and recovery efforts of a critically endangered species. I think that's a really neat opportunity to be able to be involved in that. So if you are interested in potentially volunteering, we are always recruiting new volunteers. We love having new volunteers come on board. There is just it's pretty easy to become a volunteer, but there are just a few little bits of criteria. You have to be 18 years of age unless accompanied by an adult. So, if you're younger than 18, you can certainly join. You just need a parent or guardian with you at all your monitoring sessions. You also must attend a virtual orientation. So this is kind of the first step to becoming a volunteer. Each season we hold a virtual orientation. So depending on what season you would want to join, whether it's spring or fall, you would join the virtual orientation for that. So we hold a live virtual event that you can attend, but if you can't attend it, it's totally fine because we also always record it. So you could just watch the recording as well. So that's the first step, attend or watch the virtual orientation. Once you complete that virtual orientation and we get you set up in our system, we'll need to get you trained in the field. So you will have to do 1 or 2 sessions with a lead observer. That's your training session. And you must complete at least 1 training session in the field with your lead observer when belugas are present before monitoring on your own. So it's kind of hard to train you if the belugas don't show up and they're not actually there. So that's why you have to, if you don't see belugas the first time, then you'll have to go back out with your lead observer again. And just keep doing those training sessions until you do have a session where belugas are present. And because all of our monitoring sites are very, very unique, You do need to be trained at each site that you wish to monitor at. We do ask that you commit to a minimum of 3 shifts over a monitoring season. So that's a 6-hour commitment if possible, just because we put the time into training you. And if it is your first season, your training sessions are included in the 6-hour commitment. So you don't need to do an additional 6 hours on top of your training. And again, this is just something that we ask. If you cannot make that commitment, we understand life is busy, you're volunteering your time, and we're happy to have you. So if you can't make that commitment, that is totally fine, and we do understand. And then, once you do your virtual orientation, your field training, you are good to monitor away, have fun. You can monitor solo. Yeah, you can go out as much as you want once you're trained up. And for more information, we do have our website at akbmp.org, where we are consistently updating how to become a volunteer, and where you could just learn more about our program. You can also always send me an email at alaskabmp@gmail.com. I am the only one behind that email, so if you want to get in touch with me, just send an email there. And we also have some social media that you can follow as well to get some updates. And our spring season it's actually coming up fast. March will come up real fast. It's just around the corner. So definitely stay tuned for updates on our spring 2025 monitoring season. And if you are not interested specifically with monitoring with AKBMP, or if it's too much of a commitment, there are other ways that you can get involved in beluga whale conservation. You can always report your Cook Inlet beluga sightings to cookinletbelugas.com. That's our collaborator, the Cook Inlet Photo ID project. And you can submit sightings, you can submit photos. So if you're just, on your own looking at belugas and you see them, you can definitely send that information to them. That's always very helpful. You can also attend the yearly Belugas Count. This is an event held by NOAA Fisheries, and this year it's happening on Saturday, September 13th, 2025. So this is a really fun, free, family-friendly event, and in the mornings we go out to all these different monitoring sites and count belugas as they pass through, and then in the afternoon there's like this big fun celebration with all these like activities and education, and it's just a super fun event. So that's always something that you can do. Another way to contribute is to report live and dead strandings of belugas to the NOAA Fisheries Marine Mammal Stranding Network. They have a 24-hour stranding hotline. Even if it's a carcass, still call it in anyway, because you can still they can still potentially get data from that whale. And this also goes for all marine mammals, not just belugas. So if you really see any stranded marine mammal, alive or dead, definitely report it. And if you do have a boat that you go out in, you can always practice Cook Inlet beluga friendly boating operating practices. So that entails keeping at least 300 feet away from the belugas at all times if you see them, and to always steer clear of their path. Don't go towards them and cut them off. And if it's safe, put your engines in neutral as safety allows. Okay, and with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you so much for watching this presentation. I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This was wonderful. I will let you get a drink of water, breathe.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, we have a couple of questions rolling in, but feel free to enter those in the chat. I'll give you a moment to do that. And I just wanted to say, having been involved with this program since the beginning, really applaud all the work that Michelle has done with NOAA to coordinating a Cook Inlet wide program involving tons of volunteers and observers is really hard work, and we really appreciate Michelle's time to make the program happen and then to do events like this. So Michelle, I just wanted to thank you again for that. And to, as a monitor, I also really want to thank our lead observers across all the sites, but I mostly have experience with the Kenai and Kasilof sites, and all the volunteers, because you don't always see belugas, and some sites see belugas a lot more than others. Some hardly ever see them, and so really commend the volunteers who are out there, rain, shine, snow, sleet, and understanding that sometimes the absence of belugas, I mean, those data are really important as well. And so just the outpouring of public participation in this project is so uplifting and gives me hope for the species. So wanted to add those points there, but we have a couple of questions in the chat. Again, feel free to add. So Michelle, the first question is, do you have any volunteers in areas other than Cook Inlet? They're from Bristol Bay and would love updates and to alert folks when they see belugas there. So do you have any recommendations for how they could get involved?
I don't, do you have any volunteers in it? Not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure. I don't think there's other beluga programs, and I've never gotten a sighting from Bristol Bay. No one from Bristol Bay has reached out to me, but that's definitely something to look into. So thank you for thank you for bringing that up. But as far as I know, there isn't a volunteer program in Bristol Bay.
I'm reaching out, Michelle. So if you're interested, I'm keen to continue this conversation.
Oh, awesome. That'd be great. Thanks, Tab.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have another question. Beluga are sighted in the Kenai River. Actually, this is really interesting that this year we've seen belugas in the Kenai River into December. We had some just really recently. And so the question is, do you anticipate lengthening the Kenai River fall monitoring season? Thanks for that, Michael.
We haven't talked about it yet, but it might be possible, especially if the weather allows. I mean, this was a really interesting year like it's definitely has to be a conversation, especially if this is like a new regular where the belugas are, coming in. But yeah, it's been a conversation, at least amongst partners, even about adjusting our current seasons, a spring season, just because the belugas are kind of starting to shift their behavior a bit, and they're starting to show up outside of our monitoring seasons when they used to not. So conversations are starting to be had for sure about lengthening or shifting certain seasons. But the Kenai River in December this year was incredible.
Yeah, I was always shocked to get text messages every time more were seen. It's unusual because usually the ice is a barrier for people to see them. So and potentially for their traveling, but yeah, it's a great question. And so there are a couple of questions here, Michelle, that might be outside of the purview of the Alaska Beluga Monitoring program. So I understand if you can't answer them because they're more about Cook Inlet beluga recovery more broadly. So I'll break these out a little bit. The first is about eDNA monitoring. Again, if you can't speak to it, no problem. But do you know how that eDNA sampling is going?
I don't personally know the results of how that is going. I know it is still going, or at least there's proposals being put out to get funding for more of it. I think it's something that's growing a bit, but I don't know how much headway has actually been made yet, or what results or anything have been analyzed. So I can't really speak to that too much.
Yeah, and as you mentioned with the Cook Inlet Beluga Recovery Plan, there's lots of different folks in the agencies working on different aspects, and so yeah, might be limited by that with Michelle being busy with this program. And I think to narrow this question more to the scope of the partnership, have you the question is that there was a gas leak in Cook Inlet a couple years back. Were there any observed impacts to belugas, or do you think that partnership could have spoken to that, the observed observations?
Not to my knowledge. At least there was, as far as I know, nothing that stood out in the AKBMP data. At least when we were looking at it, maybe researchers that we had sent it off to maybe saw something, but I have not received any feedback of observed impacts specifically from that event. And I think it's also because I have only been in this position for a year, so I wasn't here for some of these things. So I'm maybe not as privy or updated to some of these particular events.
Yeah, thank you for that. Are there any other questions from folks? I don't have so much of a question, but just as another observation that I usually tell folks when they're thinking about becoming a volunteer is that once you're trained up and you have a site that you feel comfortable with, it's really, I think it's very easy to sign up for shifts, and you can look at the spreadsheet and see what shifts are available. And most of my monitoring has been when I have a free couple of hours and I can just sign up for something after being trained. So I think that there's it's a really dynamic kind of, once you're trained up and you have the information, it's very much that you can volunteer when you're able. So I think that that's a great aspect of the program. All right, I'll tie it up with this last question. Again, more about belugas specific or broadly than the specific program, but is there an upper end to the reproductive age for belugas?
An upper end. I don't know if we specifically know that information just because we're still like learning about it, but I'm pretty sure they have, I don't know if it was through biopsy or I'm pretty sure they have definitely seen females in their 40s have young. I don't know if that's the upper age. I just know that in that age they are still having young, and I don't know if we know that information because we don't know a lot about their reproductive their reproductive journey, especially for Cook Inlet. Reproductive rates are going down, and I don't know how Cook Inlet belugas reproductive rates are comparing to other populations.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you for all the questions.
Thank you.
And because we're virtual, it's hard, we can't really give an applause. So if you have any comments for Michelle, sometimes it's like you're speaking into a void. So we're already getting some thanks for the informative presentation. Thanks so much for sharing, Michelle. Yes, some clapping. Again, you can find information to contact the program and Michelle at akbmp.org. And as Michelle mentioned, all of the partner organizations are doing great things to keep those sites hosted. And some of those organizations, I think, all have other work that they're doing to support Cook Inlet belugas as well. And so if you're interested in learning more about Alaska Wildlife Alliance's work, in addition to being a community organization partner for this program, I just put the link in the chat. We have 3 focus areas for the recovery of Cook Inlet belugas. The first is outreach and awareness, which is really supported by our work with the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Program. We also have a project to increase prey available to belugas, essentially, so they have more food to eat. We had a big win at the Board of Fish last year to get more fish available to belugas in the Susitna River when they're calving. And then we also have a project to make the waters cleaner, so to reduce contaminants that are facing belugas. You can learn all about that on that website. And then also just to throw in the number, it's bold and big, but if you're on the Kenai and Kisila and you would like to you would like to get text. If you would like to receive text about beluga sightings, you can text beluga to that number there. Yeah, thank you so much again, Michelle. Do you have any closing thoughts, or do you know when the volunteer training will be yet for the live virtual training yet?
I have not decided on a day yet.
Great.
It's usually March 20th or around there, but I am finishing up finalizing the flyer and trying to pick a date. So I will be letting the public know very soon updates on the spring season, when our next orientation is. And again, you could always reach out with any questions. I'm always happy to receive emails and answer questions. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out to me. And on the website, there's also my phone number is also there too, if you would rather talk to me on the phone, which is fine too. But just as closing, again, Nicole, thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for joining. I see some current volunteers on here. Maybe there's some potential new volunteers. Regardless, thank you all so much for listening and caring about the belugas. They're a really important species, and just joining this today is, and learning is part of the recovery efforts in itself.
So much, Michelle. Great. Well, everyone have a wonderful evening. We will have our next Wildlife Wednesday next month, the third Wednesday of the month. If you have a topic that you want to learn more about, please reach out to us on our website. We love to have recommendations. We're still looking to break our most attended Wildlife Wednesday record, which was on razor clams, surprisingly. So, if you have a species or topic that you're really interested, please let us know. Thank you so much. Thanks, Michelle, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.